A loud scream echoed through Michael's dimly lit room, shattering the peaceful silence of the night. He bolted upright from his sleep, his heart pounding in alarm. His gaze darted to the disheveled figure sitting on his bed, Casandra, her face contorted in shock and disbelief. What happened to us?" she stammered, clutching the sheets around her trembling form. Her voice cracked as she touched her bare skin, realization dawning upon her like a cruel joke. "Why don't I have a—" She trailed off, her hands gripping the blanket tighter. "I lost what I cared about the most because of you." Her expression shifted from horror to fury, and without warning, she grabbed the nearest pillow and flung it at him with all her strength. "Stop it. You thought you were some pure, innocent angel?" Michael scoffed, rubbing his temple as he dodged the incoming assault. His gaze fell to the deep crimson stains on the white sheets, and a flicker of understanding crossed his face. Casandra gasped at his words, her frustration bubbling over. "Excuse me. I'll have you know that I was pure before you." Before Michael could respond, the door burst open, revealing Chairman Lucy, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Oh my, you two really couldn't wait, could you?" she mused, clapping her hands together. "You should have saved this for after the wedding." Cassandra's face burned with embarrassment, and she yanked the blanket over her head. Meanwhile, Michael groaned, running a hand through his hair. "Grandma, at least knock next time," he muttered, irritated. Chairman Lucy merely grinned. "Looks like I'll need to move up your wedding date. Congratulations, my dear grandson." And with that, she left, humming a merry tune. Cassandra peeked out from under the blanket, her eyes narrowing. "You better pay me a fortune for this." Michael chuckled, amused. "Oh, and how much would it cost to kiss you?" He leaned in teasingly. 50,000, she declared without hesitation. Michael threw his head back and laughed. "And what about more than a kiss?" Cassandra's face turned scarlet, and she scrambled back, only to tumble off the bed. "Ari, you're impossible." Michael stood, smirking down at her. "You really do think in terms of money, don't you? Fine, I'll consider it." The morning after was no better. Cassandra tried to slip out of the house unnoticed, but her stiff gait and awkward movements didn't go unnoticed. "What happened to you? Why are you walking like that?" Mabel, one of the housemaids, eyed her suspiciously. Cassandra stiffened. Before she could come up with an excuse, Chairman Lucy's voice rang out. "Oh, it's because Michael tired her out last night." The old woman chuckled gleefully. Cassandra wanted the ground to swallow her whole. "Lola." Michael sauntered into the room, entirely unbothered by the commotion. "She has an errand to run, so I'll take her." "I can take a taxi," Cassandra insisted, desperate to escape the teasing eyes of the Monteverdi household. Michael ignored her protests and opened the car door. "Get in." Left with no choice, Cassandra climbed inside, avoiding his gaze. The ride was silent for a while until she mustered the courage to speak. "What happened last night? It was a mistake." Michael tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "Maybe, but you can't take it back now." She scoffed. "You're insufferable." A smirk tugged at his lips. "And yet, here you are." Back at the Monteverdi residence, Chairman Lucy cornered Michael in the living room. "Did you bring your girlfriend back?" she asked bluntly. Michael sighed. "Yes. Is there something you need, Grandma?" Chairman Lucy beamed. "Tell Cassandra to come here tomorrow. I want to teach her my special recipes so that when you two get married, she'll know how to cook for you." Michael's brow furrowed. "You really like her, don't you?" "Of course. She's kind, feisty, and has spirit. Don't let her go." Michael huffed, shaking his head. "That girl has bewitched you." "What was that?" Chairman Lucy raised a brow. "Nothing, Grandma," Michael muttered, hiding a smirk. Later that evening, as he entered his room, his eyes landed on the blood-stained sheets. He exhaled slowly, his mind drifting back to Cassandra's words. So she was telling the truth? A small smile played on his lips as he reached for his phone. Ring, ring. Casandra answered with an exasperated sigh. Who is this? Me, Michael. Come over tomorrow. Why? Just be here. Before she could argue, he hung up. Meanwhile, Cassandra's younger brother entered the room. 8. Dad's condition is improving. Relief washed over her. Thank God. At that moment, she pushed aside all thoughts of Michael, focusing on the family that needed her the most. Casandra sat in the hospital room beside her father's bed, her hands trembling as she gripped his frail fingers. The beeping of the monitors was the only sound breaking the heavy silence. Her father stirred slightly, his eyes fluttering open to see her worried expression. Casandra. His voice was weak, but his love for her was evident in his tone. Papa, you're awake, she gasped, relief washing over her as she gently squeezed his hand. I was so worried. He gave her a tired smile before his gaze darkened. You've been staying with that Monteverde boy, haven't you? Casandra hesitated, then sighed. It's complicated, Papa. Before he could respond, the door to the hospital room swung open. Michael stepped inside, carrying a bouquet of fresh lilies. You. Her father's voice grew sharp, his weak body tensing. What are you doing here? Michael placed the flowers on the bedside table, unbothered by the hostility, making sure Casandra is safe. And you, sir, need to get better. Her father scoffed, turning his head away. Casandra swallowed her frustration and stood, pulling Michael by the wrist outside the room. What are you doing here? She hissed. Michael smirked. I told you to come home early. Since you didn't, I figured I'd find you myself. Casandra glared at him. I have a life outside of your ridiculous games, Michael. Funny, he mused, stepping closer. Because you're already part of my life, whether you like it or not. Casandra shivered at his closeness, but before she could retort, a nurse passed by, shooting them a knowing glance. Embarrassed, she pushed Michael back. Leave, Michael. I'll see you tomorrow. Make sure you do, he whispered before strolling away, leaving Casandra flustered and annoyed. The following day, Casandra arrived at the Monteverde estate, mentally preparing herself for whatever nonsense Michael's family had planned. As soon as she stepped inside, Chairman Lucy beamed at her. Oh, my dear. Come, come. We have so much to do today. Casandra forced a polite smile. Lola, I really don't think. Nonsense. Chairman Lucy dragged her into the kitchen. If you're going to marry Michael, you need to learn how to keep his stomach happy. Casandra froze. Who said anything about marriage? Chairman Lucy waved a hand dismissively. It's bound to happen. Might as well prepare. Casandra groaned, rolling up her sleeves. Fine, let's get this over with. An hour later, she found herself covered in flour, sauce, and bits of vegetables as Chairman Lucy chuckled at her poor attempts at cooking. I don't think cooking is my strong suit, Casandra admitted, wiping sweat from her brow. That's fine, Chairman Lucy said, as long as your heart is in the right place. Michael walked into the kitchen just as Casandra nearly knocked over a pot of boiling soup. He leaned against the counter, watching her struggle with amusement. I should be charging people to see this, he teased. Casandra shot him a glare. Shut up. Chairman Lucy clapped her hands. All right, enough playing around. Time to discuss something serious. Michael and Casandra exchanged wary glances before sitting at the dining table. I want you two to get married next month, Chairman Lucy announced. Casandra choked on air. Lola, what? Michael sighed, rubbing his temples. Grandma, you can't just… Oh, but I can, she interrupted, smiling sweetly. And I will. Casandra stood up, panic rising in her chest. You can't just force me to. Chairman Lucy cut her off. I'm not forcing you, dear. I'm giving you a choice. Marry Michael, and I'll ensure your father gets the best medical treatment possible. Or walk away. and your father's care will be uncertain." Cassandra's blood ran cold. Michael stiffened beside her, looking at his grandmother with disbelief. "Grandma, that's low, even for you," he said, his voice edged with irritation. Chairman Lucy shrugged. "I'm just securing the future of this family." Cassandra clenched her fists. She had always prided herself on her independence, her ability to carve her own path. But now, with her father's life hanging in the balance, did she really have a choice? Michael sighed. "Cassandra, you don't have to do this." She turned to him, eyes blazing. "Yes, I do." Cassandra had barely wrapped her mind around the situation when the entire Monteverde estate erupted in celebration. Chairman Lucy wasted no time in announcing the engagement, much to Cassandra's horror. A lavish dinner was organized, filled with guests, champagne, and endless murmurs of congratulations. Cassandra sat stiffly beside Michael, every fiber of her being screaming at her to run. Michael, on the other hand, looked completely at ease, swirling the wine in his glass. He leaned closer and whispered, "Relax. You look like you're about to pass out." Cassandra elbowed him sharply. "I hate you." He chuckled. "You'll get used to me." Suddenly, a familiar voice rang out from the entrance. Well, I never thought I'd see this day." Cassandra turned to see a woman dressed in an expensive red gown sauntering toward them. Her striking features were framed by waves of dark hair, and her smirk was nothing short of predatory. Michael's entire demeanor changed. His grip tightened on his wine glass, his jaw clenching. "Vanessa," he said, his voice colder than ice. Cassandra glanced between them, sensing the tension. "Who's she?" Vanessa's smirk widened. "Oh, darling, didn't he tell you? I'm his ex-fiancée." Cassandra's stomach twisted. Just when she thought things couldn't get worse, it seemed like her so-called engagement was about to turn into an all-out war. Cassandra's breath hitched as Vanessa slid into the seat across from them, her piercing gaze never leaving Michael's face. The air in the lavish dining hall grew thick with tension, the clinking of glasses and murmurs of guests fading into the background. "Well, aren't you going to introduce us properly, Michael?" Vanessa cooed, resting her chin on her manicured hand. Michael exhaled sharply, his grip on his wine glass unwavering. "Cassandra, this is Vanessa. Vanessa, Cassandra, my fiancée." The way he said the word sent an uncomfortable shiver down Cassandra's spine. Vanessa arched a perfectly sculpted brow, her smirk deepening. "Fiancé? Huh? That's new." Cassandra straightened her shoulders, refusing to let Vanessa intimidate her. "Yes. And who are you, exactly?" Michael shot her a warning look, but Vanessa laughed, the sound dripping with amusement. "Oh, sweetheart, I was the original Monteverde bride-to-be, before Michael decided he wanted something different." Cassandra's stomach twisted. "Is that so?" Michael leaned in, his voice firm. "Vanessa, don't." Vanessa pouted. "Relax, darling. I'm just here to wish you the best. After all, marriages built on convenience are so romantic." Cassandra felt a sting at Vanessa's words. Before she could respond, Chairman Lucy approached, her smile as sharp as ever. "Vanessa, how nice of you to drop by," she said smoothly. "But I do believe this is a private celebration." Vanessa's smirk faltered slightly before she stood. "Of course, Chairman. I wouldn't want to overstay my welcome." She turned to Michael, her expression unreadable. "Just remember, darling, some things don't change, no matter how hard you try." With that, she sauntered out of the hall, leaving Cassandra with a million questions and a growing sense of unease. Later that evening, Cassandra stormed into Michael's study, slamming the door behind her. He barely looked up from the documents he was reviewing. "Something on your mind, sweetheart?" he asked dryly. Cassandra crossed her arms. "Vanessa." Michael sighed, rubbing his temple. "I figured." "What was that about? Your ex-fiancée? And you didn't think to mention her?" Michael finally met her gaze, his expression unreadable. Because it doesn't matter. Casandra scoffed. It does when she acts like she still has a claim on you. Michael leaned back in his chair, watching her intently. Why? Are you jealous? Casandra clenched her fists. This isn't about jealousy. This is about me knowing exactly what I've gotten myself into. Michael sighed, pushing his chair back and standing up. He walked toward her slowly, stopping just a breath away. You agreed to this engagement to save your father. That was the deal. Nothing more, nothing less. Casandra swallowed hard, hating how her heart betrayed her by racing. Then keep it that way. Michael smirked. Careful, Casandra. The more you fight, the more intriguing you become. She scowled, stepping away. You're insufferable. Michael chuckled. And you're in too deep. Casandra turned on her heel, storming out of the room, her heart pounding. The engagement was a game to him, but she wasn't about to let herself become another piece on his board. Days passed in a blur of wedding preparations that Casandra wanted no part of. Yet, every time she tried to push back, Chairman Lucy reminded her of the stakes. Her father's well-being depended on this arrangement. One evening, as she walked through the Monteverde Estate's sprawling gardens, Michael found her sitting alone by the fountain. The moonlight reflected off the water, casting a soft glow on her face. You're avoiding me, he noted, taking a seat beside her. Casandra exhaled. You make it easy. Michael chuckled. You're overthinking as usual. She turned to him, searching his face. Why me? Michael raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? You could have married anyone. Someone who actually wanted this. Why force me into it? Michael was silent for a moment before he spoke. Because you challenge me. Casandra blinked, caught off guard. Excuse me? Michael smirked. I've spent my entire life surrounded by people who either feared me, admired me, or wanted something from me. But you? You don't back down. You stand your ground, even when you know you're walking straight into fire. Casandra scoffed. That's not a compliment. Michael leaned in, his voice lower. It is to me. Cassandra's breath hitched as his intense gaze held hers. For the first time, she saw something other than arrogance in his eyes, something deeper, more dangerous. And that terrified her more than anything. Casandra paced her room, replaying Michael's words in her mind. You don't back down. You stand your ground, even when you know you're walking straight into fire. Why did that sound like something she should fear? A knock on her door startled her. Before she could answer, Michael walked in, exuding confidence as usual. You really should learn to lock your door, he mused, leaning against the frame. Casandra glared. You should learn to respect privacy. Michael smirked. Where's the fun in that? Casandra folded her arms. What do you want? Michael studied her for a moment before speaking. Chairman Lucy wants us to start making public appearances together. There's a gala tomorrow night. Be ready. Casandra scoffed. So now I'm just an accessory? Michael stepped closer, his gaze intense. You're much more than that, Casandra. But if you want to keep your father safe, you'll play your part. Casandra hated the way her stomach twisted at his words. He knew exactly where to strike. Fine, she said through gritted teeth, but don't expect me to enjoy it. Michael chuckled, stepping back. I wouldn't dream of it. The Monteverde Estate's ballroom was dazzling, filled with high-profile guests sipping champagne under a ceiling dripping with chandeliers. Casandra stood beside Michael, forcing a polite smile as countless people greeted them. You look stunning, Michael murmured, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. The warmth of his touch sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine. Casandra glanced up at him. Flattery won't make me hate this any less. Michael chuckled. I wasn't trying to flatter you. I was just stating a fact. Before Casandra could retort, a familiar voice sliced through the chatter. Well, isn't this a sight? Casandra turned, her heart sinking. Vanessa stood before them, looking effortlessly elegant in a crimson dress. Michael's expression darkened. Vanessa. Vanessa smiled sweetly, her gaze flicking between them. I must say, Casandra, you're handling this arrangement better than I expected. Casandra refused to let Vanessa rattle her. It's called adaptability. Vanessa laughed. Oh, darling, that's what I like about you. But let's be honest, you're just another piece in the Monteverdi chess game. Michael's grip on Cassandra's waist tightened. That's enough. Vanessa raised a perfectly arched brow. Oh, Michael, don't get so defensive. It's just fun watching you pretend. Cassandra had enough. She took Michael's glass from his hand, downed the champagne in one gulp, and turned to Vanessa with a sharp smile. Pretend? That's funny. You're the one still acting like you have a role in this story. Vanessa's smirk faltered for just a second before she let out a laugh. Touché, sweetheart. Michael's lips curled into an amused smile as Vanessa walked away. Impressive. Cassandra rolled her eyes. Don't get used to it. Michael leaned in, his voice just above a whisper. Too late. Cassandra hated how her heart skipped a beat. The car ride home was silent, tension crackling between them. Cassandra stared out the window, determined to ignore the way Michael kept stealing glances at her. You handled Vanessa well, he finally said. Cassandra scoffed. What? Did you expect me to run away crying? Michael smirked. No, I expected you to do exactly what you did. Cassandra turned to face him, narrowing her eyes. Then why bring me to that circus? Michael leaned back in his seat. Because you need to get used to it. This world, these people, they'll test you, and you have to be ready. Cassandra's fingers curled into fists. And what if I don't want to play this game? Michael's gaze darkened. Then you lose. Cassandra hated that he was right. This was more than an arrangement. It was a battle of control of wills. And if she wasn't careful, she wouldn't just lose the game. She'd lose herself. Cassandra sat on the Grand Monteverdi estate balcony, staring at the city lights. The night air was cool, but she hardly noticed. Her mind was too preoccupied with Michael's words from earlier. Then you lose. She refused to lose. A soft knock on the door made her tense. She turned to see Michael standing there, hands in his pockets, watching her with that unreadable expression of his. You're brooding, he said, stepping onto the balcony. Cassandra sighed. Observant, aren't you? Michael leaned against the railing. You have a lot on your mind. Cassandra huffed. You think? Michael studied her. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. Cassandra shook her head. Strength has nothing to do with this. Michael smirked. Doesn't it? Cassandra turned to him, frustration flickering in her eyes. This arrangement, this game, we both know it's about power, and right now, I have none. Michael reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was surprisingly gentle. Then take it. Cassandra swallowed, unsure whether to be wary or intrigued by his words. The days that followed were a whirlwind of social events, business meetings, and carefully curated appearances. Cassandra played her part, standing beside Michael, enduring the whispers and sideways glances from those who doubted her place at his side. One evening, after yet another dinner event, Michael escorted her to her room. She turned to him, exhaustion clear in her expression. Is this what my life is now? Michael leaned against the doorframe, his gaze steady. You agreed to this. Cassandra exhaled. I didn't realize agreeing meant losing myself. Michael's expression shifted. For a moment, something unguarded flickered in his eyes. You're not losing yourself. You're finding a new version of you. Cassandra let out a dry laugh. And what if I don't like her? Michael stepped closer, his voice low, then changed the rules of the game. Her breath caught. His proximity was overwhelming, the intensity of his gaze unsettling. She hated that despite everything, part of her was drawn to him in a way she couldn't explain. Good night, Michael, she said softly, stepping into her room and closing the door before he could say another word. The tension between them was becoming unbearable. Casandra wasn't sure if it was because of their constant battles for control or the undeniable pull between them. One evening, after a particularly heated discussion about their upcoming wedding, Casandra lost her temper. "Why do you get to dictate everything?" she snapped. Michael leaned in, his tone calm but firm. "Because that's how this world works." Casandra shook her head. "Not anymore." Without thinking, she grabbed Michael's collar and kissed him. It was reckless, desperate, a challenge more than anything. But the moment their lips met, the battle they had been waging turned into something else entirely. Michael responded instantly, his hands gripping her waist, pulling her closer. The air crackled with something raw and unspoken. Then, just as quickly, Casandra pulled away, breathless, her heart hammering in her chest. Michael smirked. "Interesting tactic." Casandra took a shaky step back. "That wasn't." Michael interrupted, his voice low. "Oh, but it was." She turned on her heel and left, knowing she had just crossed a line she wasn't ready for. And Michael? He was more than willing to see just how far she was willing to go. Casandra paced the length of her bedroom, her thoughts tangled in the web of emotions Michael had stirred within her. The memory of their kiss burned in her mind, an unshakable mark of defiance and desire intertwined. She had crossed a line, and now there was no going back. A sharp knock at the door broke her thoughts. She took a deep breath before opening it, finding Michael standing there, his expression unreadable as ever. "You've been avoiding me," he said. Casandra folded her arms. "I needed space." Michael smirked. "Space? After what you did, I don't think space is what you want." Her heart pounded. "And what exactly do you think I want?" Michael took a step closer, forcing her to tilt her head up to meet his gaze. "I think you want control." Casandra swallowed hard. "Maybe I do. Maybe I want to remind you that I'm not just a pawn in your game." Michael chuckled, the sound dark and knowing. "Then make your next move wisely, Casandra, because I don't lose." She held his gaze, refusing to let him see the way he affected her. But deep inside, she knew the game had shifted, and she wasn't sure if she was still in control. The next morning, Casandra found herself back in the high society circles Michael belonged to, her hand resting in the crook of his arm as they attended a charity gala. The room was filled with murmurs, gazes lingering too long, as if everyone was waiting for her to falter. Michael leaned in, his lips brushing against her ear. "Smile. You're making people nervous." Casandra turned her face toward him, forcing a smirk. "Let them be nervous." Michael's lips quirked. "Now that's the spirit." As the evening went on, Casandra played her role flawlessly, charming guests, making calculated small talk. But it wasn't until she stepped away for a moment that she overheard two women whispering. "She's nothing more than a temporary distraction. Do you honestly think Michael will keep her around?" Cassandra's blood boiled. Every muscle in her body screamed for her to turn around and shut them up, but instead, she took a slow breath and straightened her shoulders. She walked back to Michael and slid her arm around his waist, making sure their onlookers saw. Michael arched an eyebrow but didn't pull away. "Everything all right?" he asked, sensing something had shifted. Casandra smiled sweetly. "Perfect." Let them talk. She'd show them just how wrong they were. That night, when they returned to the estate, Michael lingered by her bedroom door. There was something different in the air between them, charged and tense. "You handled yourself well tonight," Michael said. Casandra leaned against the doorway, studying him. "Did you expect anything less?" Michael chuckled. "No, but you did surprise me." Casandra tilted her head. "Good." For a moment, neither of them moved. The tension from their kiss days before still hung between them, unspoken but undeniable. Casandra wasn't sure who moved first, but suddenly, Michael was close, too close. "Casandra," he murmured, his voice low, warning. She didn't hesitate. This time, when she kissed him, it wasn't out of defiance. It was out of something else, something she wasn't ready to name. Michael responded instantly, his hands tangling in her hair, pulling her closer. Their breaths mingled, their restraint unraveling by the second. But just as quickly as it began, Michael pulled back, his breath ragged. "This is dangerous." Cassandra's heart pounded. "Then maybe I like danger." Michael exhaled sharply. "Be careful what you wish for." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the doorway, breathless and shaken. And for the first time, Cassandra wondered if she had just crossed a line she couldn't return from. Cassandra lay awake, staring at the ceiling as Michael's words echoed in her mind. Be careful what you wish for. She had wished for control, for a way to prove to him, and to herself, that she wasn't just a pawn in whatever twisted game he was playing. But every time she thought she had the upper hand, Michael flipped the board. The morning sun barely peeked through the curtains when a knock rapped against her door. She knew who it was before she answered. Michael stood there, dressed in his usual crisp, effortless elegance, his piercing gaze scanning her. "You didn't sleep?" Cassandra folded her arms, leaning against the doorway. "Neither did you." A ghost of a smirk played on his lips. "You're getting better at reading me. I don't need to read you to know that whatever this is between us, it's far from over." Michael stepped closer, his voice a low murmur. "You're right, and that's what makes it dangerous." Cassandra met his gaze, unflinching. "Are you scared, Michael?" His smirk deepened, but there was something else behind it, something she couldn't quite place. "Of you? Never. But maybe you should be scared of me." She refused to let him intimidate her. "Then let's see who wins this game." Michael chuckled, brushing a stray hair from her face. "Careful, sweetheart. You might just like losing." The gala was a dazzling affair. Chandeliers dripping with crystals, guests adorned in the finest couture. Cassandra was no stranger to extravagance, but tonight, she felt different. This wasn't just another event. This was a test. Michael had his hand on her lower back as they entered, a silent reminder that she was still his in the eyes of the world. She played her role perfectly, engaging in polite conversation, laughing at the right moments. But her mind was elsewhere, on the whispered words she had overheard the night before. "She's nothing more than a distraction. He'll grow tired of her." Cassandra clenched her jaw as she scanned the room, searching for the woman who had said it. She found her near the bar, draped in an emerald gown, smirking as if she already knew Cassandra had heard her. Michael sensed the change in her posture. "Cassandra?" She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Kiss me." His brow lifted slightly. "Excuse me?" "Right here, right now. Make it convincing." Michael didn't hesitate. His hand slid to the nape of her neck, his lips capturing hers with a possessiveness that sent a clear message to everyone watching. When he pulled back, his eyes burned into hers. "Satisfied?" Cassandra licked her lips, her breath unsteady. "Not even close." Michael smirked. "Good. Then maybe you finally understand." Cassandra straightened her shoulders and whispered, "I was never the one who needed convincing." She turned, walking away with a confidence she wasn't sure she actually felt, leaving Michael standing there, watching her with something dangerous glinting in his eyes. The game had truly begun. Cassandra had played along for long enough. The whispered insults, the patronizing stares, the way everyone assumed she was temporary. It had all built up inside her like a pressure cooker ready to explode. And tonight, it would. She spotted the woman in the emerald dress, still smugly sipping her champagne, casting glances in Michael's direction. Cassandra didn't hesitate. She marched across the room, each step deliberate, until she stood face to face with the woman who had so confidently dismissed her. "Enjoying the view?" Cassandra asked, her voice deceptively sweet. The woman's smirk didn't falter, just admiring what won't last. Cassandra leaned in, lowering her voice. Deceptively sweet. The woman's smirk didn't falter, just admiring what won't last. Cassandra leaned in, lowering her voice so only she could hear. "Funny, I was thinking the same thing about you. Michael suddenly appeared beside her, placing a possessive hand on Cassandra's waist. Everything all right, darling? Cassandra tilted her head, keeping her gaze locked on the woman. Perfect. Just clearing up some misconceptions. Michael smirked knowingly. Glad to hear it. As the woman walked away, clearly flustered, Michael turned to Cassandra. You're playing a dangerous game. She met his gaze with unwavering confidence. So are you. For the first time, Michael looked at her not as a pawn, but as an equal. And that was the moment Cassandra knew. She wasn't just surviving this game. She was winning it.